All right. So I'm Alan Reese with Yahoo. I'm here to present automated distribution of open source and private components with JFrog's Bintray. My cohort, Jack Weaver, will talk about the open source part. I'm going to talk about the private party distributions we do with Bintray. First, this is our safe harbor slide. Everything I say is a lie. We're going to talk about how we use Bintray, how we distribute private party builds, deploying open source for free, and then deploying to Bintray with Travis CI, which is probably the most interesting part, and then we'll do a Q&A. So why would you want to use Bintray? We had somebody who wanted to open a firewall hole for our internal Artifactory instance. It was for a single partner for a single build. We needed to share copies of a build of some application with these people. We turned them down. We're trying to find a way to work around this. And a few weeks later, we ended up setting up with Bintray. And a few weeks later, a couple more of these came in. And then somebody else was like, hey, I want to publish open source on Bintray. Turns out Maven Central setup is really hard to do. We have an unusual setup with Bintray. We have multiple people pushing open source, and then we have multiple people sharing builds with contractors and third parties. We call these private party builds. They go to a specific customer. They're generally watermarked. There's only 1 or 2 downloads of them. They're not for public consumption. They're typically mobile apps. We also have multiple teams that want to publish open source artifacts. Bintray requires you to use user credentials to push, or if you have enterprise entitlements. And this has changed since we wrote the slides. They've added a few new levels, so there's a much lower level you can get entitlements at. So since we don't want to be controlling the users and dealing with the various users, we want the teams to be able to do it themselves, we decided to use entitlements. This is an example of some of the repos. You can see we have partner A. We have a bunch of JNI libraries everyone likes to use. We have Tachyon, our super secret mobile apps. And then the one that's public is actually the Maven repo. That's where you'll find things like the Flurry SDK and the OMID libraries. So what is a private party build? I kind of went over this. They're non-public builds. They're unpublished, and we can't have people getting them because it would be leaked. So what we do is we use download keys and entitlements. So the download key is good for 24 hours and for 1 download. This actually works really well. We talked to someone who's doing this with their licensed software. They send their customer a license key. It gives them 4 or 5 downloads, however many they need. And once those are downloaded, it's done. You can no longer download it again. You have to contact support for a new one. This is how we deal with it because they're builds we do not want leaked. We want one person to get it and then be done with it. We have 1 repo per consumer. We use signed URLs for every build. They expire after 24 hours. They're valid for a single download. If you're distributing licensed software, maybe you'll say 5 downloads. We encrypt them with a shared key before we send them because you don't want somebody intercepting the email. For most of our use cases, it's 1 repo per product. Depending on if you're distributing private party builds or licensed software, you might do it a little differently. You can control the entitlements. You can get pretty fine-grained with the entitlements. You want to talk to support about that. And now we're going to do open source distribution with Jack.
Quick disclaimer, as of about 2-3 weeks ago, I left Yahoo, so I'm no longer there. In addition to what Alan says being a lie, everything that I am saying is definitely a lie. So I'm gonna run through some quick things with open source and how we kind of manage that at Yahoo. We have the enterprise license and setup. So what we do is not going to be your typical use case because we do employ the use of download keys and entitlements. And we've done that really early on when Bintray first introduced this. So, you know, gosh, right when it was kind of really cutting edge features that Bintray was introducing as download keys, we decided to start using those. And we applied it into our open source. So the goal here is we kind of want automated releases right into Bintray with minimal hand-to-hand holding, right? Yahoo's a big company. We're a tools team. There's only so many of us. We kind of want to empower the open source teams, those that own the open source projects at github.com/Yahoo, to go ahead and do releases as they need them, but not have to come to us all the time for everything. And what this means is that, well, there's a few approaches. You want to onboard them. So we've come up with kind of a streamlined process. We have forms that they fill out and they go through in order to get them onboarded. And in addition to that, we're actually using a unique application of download keys for every project and an entitlement for those projects. And so the way this works is if you go to bintray.com/Yahoo right now, you'll get a picture similar to this. We've got our projects. They're kind of, those four are visible right here. And we go through and we say, okay, you want to come on, you want to actually create your package on Bintray. You have your source code in GitHub. We're going to create a download key for you. And we're also going to create entitlements. And those entitlements are, there's one per project. And then I'm going to scope your entitlement, your download key, to that entitlement. And so what this means is that the keys that I've given you to access, read, and write into your repository is scoped. It won't work for other projects. This gives us a lot of advantages. For one, there's no shared account. So if you want to do this outside the use of download keys or entitlements, you might have to share account credentials to gain access to publish from Travis CI, for instance, which I'll talk about in a minute. And two, I can roll these keys. If a lot of the maintainers of the project or someone, whoever's the point of contact that owns that project leaves or anything like that, we can roll them, all right? So how do you go about doing this? Well, for one, you want to create your key. Pretty simple. All this is documented in Bintray's doc. I'm not going to talk too much about the APIs, but I'll show you some examples. You create your download key. It's an easy post call. You basically are going to say, hey, this is the name of my key. And in addition to that, you have to authenticate yourself to Bintray. And what that means is that right there is the base64 encoded username and API key of my account on Bintray. So I'm on Bintray, I'm an admin, and here I am, I'm authenticating. It's normal HTTP basic authentication. That's all it is. You're going to get back a response. It's going to give you your username. Don't worry, this doesn't exist. This was just a test. I've deleted it since, so I have no problem showing the password up there. And that's your keys. Those are it, right? You're good. Part two, you want to create the entitlement. So now that you have your key, you need to scope that key for access into some project. Pretty much the same in terms of the actual authentication. You also need to pass in your credentials. I've got that basic cat encoded key auth. In addition to that, you're going to pass in JSON data, and you want to say read write or write. You want to give it some access. And then finally, you're going to say what key you want to apply that access to. You'll notice in the URL, I'm actually down all the way to that hello Bintray. So packages, Yahoo, Maven, hello Bintray. That hello Bintray part, that's my package in Bintray. So we have some other customer or group within Yahoo that has an open source project on GitHub. What they do is we create that package for them, hello Bintray, and then we go ahead and create these keys and we scope them directly into that package. They have the download key, that username and the password in the prior step. We create this scope part that entitles that download key to go ahead and access with read write. And of course, you're going to get back, your 201 response created, everything's good to go. So here's the fun part. We got to make this work from CI. At Yahoo, we have internal CI systems that we've been building and using. In open source, the common use case is to use Travis. So Travis CI is pretty well known. It's popular. What I'm going to walk through is kind of how to set that up with Maven. You could do all this stuff with Gradle just as easily. Maven's just kind of the choice we have here. And then once it's set up, there's a couple of decisions you got to make. One is, do you want to control your deployment process? So commits are coming into your GitHub repo, and you make a decision at some point in time to make a release. At that point, you can use the Maven release plugin. You run that command, it tags the code, it goes out to Travis. Travis sees that tag. Travis uses the credentials that we give it from our download key, and it pushes that package out to Bintray. It's kind of how this whole system works, and you'll see in future slides. So one thing that you're going to want to do is obviously give Travis CI your credentials. How do you do that? There's two ways. This is a screenshot of Travis CI's user interface. So if you go inside, you can actually set Bintray user and Bintray API key, and it actually encrypts those at runtime. So now when your project runs, you actually have environment variables that you can reference from Maven to get your user and API. The second way to do it is to use the command line, the Travis CI command line tool. And you give it a command, you tell it what your username and your password is, and it actually encrypts those and stores it inside your Travis YAML file. And so you end up with those two little secure lines here at the bottom. They're highlighted in yellow. It's a little difficult to see on the slides. I'd recommend going the first way, but you do know that there are two ways of doing this. Another component is Maven needs to know what to do, right? So pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Now that you have those environment variables and they're present at build time, you go ahead and reference them from your settings XML. So you create a settings.xml file and you pass it into Maven. env dot, that's referencing the environment variable that's available at build time from Travis. And it's the same as what we encrypted here prior. So Bintray user, Bintray API key, and Bintray user, Bintray API key, right in the settings. And so what that means is your username and password is not exposed anywhere. It's secret, tucked away inside Travis. And of course, we've already done the plumbing on the back end for Bintray so that that key actually accesses the package we want in Bintray. And then the next thing is you need to point your distribution. You got to point Maven to where the distribution's at. I used an example project we have at Yahoo called Omid, and the full, it's API bintray.com, Maven, Yahoo, Maven, Omid. Pretty straightforward. Now comes the fun part. You want to make a release. So you have a team of developers, and they've gone through and they've accepted a lot of pull requests, and they've gone back and forth. Maybe they're working towards a milestone, whatever have you. Now they make a decision, hey, I want to do a release. Well, what I've illustrated here so far is pretty good. Travis isn't going to do a release. It doesn't know that. All it knows is that it's building, right? Basic Maven clean install, basic build. You can tell Travis to do a Maven prepare release, Maven prepare, and it will go ahead and release that into Bintray. You can do that, but then that means that you're doing releases on every commit. You probably don't want that. So what you do is you actually have your developer actually just run the Maven release plugin on their checkout. So one of the maintainers of the project has the code on their laptop on their developer box. They come to a decision to make a new release. At that point in time, you can use a Maven release plugin. It'll tag it, it'll bump a version, and it will actually increment you to the next development cycle. So major, minor patch, that patch version will get bumped. And it sets you up nice and neat. When it gets to Travis, you can put settings in your Travis file to say, hey, do a Maven deploy whenever you see this git tag. And by the way, use this settings file when you run that deploy. And what will happen is Travis will see that, and it'll grab whatever has been built from that tag, and it'll go ahead and send that out to Bintray. That's your release. That's one way to do it. There's a lot of ways to do this. What I have highlighted here is actually that command, that Maven release prepare, being run from Travis. That's one way. That's another way you can do it. Otherwise, you would do release prepare as a normal developer, right from your laptop, and then, again, you configure Travis to match against that tag number, so you can actually give it a regex. There's a lot you can do on Travis, a lot of ways to skin the cat. This is kind of what you end up with. This is a big, boxes and lines sort of picture. At the beginning, you've got your developer. He's going to go and run Maven release prepare from his laptop. Those commits are going to make their way out to Git. One of them is going to have that version number tagged in it. And what you tell Travis on the other end is, hey, look, build it, and after it's successful, if the tag matches this regex, go ahead and do a Maven deploy. And then after it runs Maven deploy, all your binaries end up into Bintray on the project that you've done. And it knows to use their credentials. You've configured it already. And all of that's scoped right inside of the package, so you don't have teams trying, there's no malicious sort of activity, right? It'd be very difficult for them to try to pull that off. On the consumer end of that, your consumer just configures their Palm to use it, right? There's a few parting thoughts here. One is that our use is a little unorthodox. We're using enterprise features for open source. I know that a lot of open source organizations are not going to have download keys, or they're called access keys now. The names have changed. I told you when Yahoo first started using this, they were called download keys. We were using it from, when they first released this feature. It was months and months ago. They're now called access keys. Same thing. If you don't have enterprise, you can still do this. There's just a couple things you have to think about. One is you can create a dedicated account inside of Bintray, and then you could just use that account credentials in your project and add that account into your Bintray organization, and you're set up, you're good to go. If it's just you working on your open source, there's no reason why you can't just put your own credentials in there. Encrypt it all with Travis in the same way, everything's kind of the same, and you're all set up. What using download keys really buys you is this headless approach to trying to do your read-write access into your repos, which Travis needs in order to publish. The nice thing is you can fully automate this, or you can partially automate it. Like at any point in that diagram that I showed, you can make a decision to, continue automation further, or you can put a human in the loop at that point. Bintray allows you to actually push publish quote unquote packages or binaries into your Bintray package, but not yet expose them to the public. So as an option, if you wanted to, you could actually push in artifacts, and only when you're ready to do a release, decide what ones you want to actually, release or discard. So a lot of options here. What I suggest is, I see a lot of open source projects. Some are using, they're actually using GitHub to store their artifacts in. I think Bintray is phenomenal because it's really easy to use. And on top of that, you can link to JCenter, and that's like your easy way into connecting up to everybody else, so that there's no special configuration that your consumer has to supply in their POM XML if they're using Maven or anything else. So this is actually a nice little system. I think it's superior to currently what's available out there, and you can automate a lot of this end to end.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it.